like that. I like that. Bishop Foreman, how are you doing, sir?
Good. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see
Yes,
everybody.
sir. Good to see you. What's going right with the church?
I'll echo everything everybody said, but I think that I think the church is fulfilling what its mission is. I think every day, people are coming to the Lord every day. Lives are being changed. Lives are being transformed, and it's a process. I think the beauty of it is that it's brutal and beautiful at the same time. Wherever there are people, there's going to be issues. Where there are people, there's going to be the things that go with people. But I think the beauty of it is just like a hospital is that we don't get rid of hospitals just because more people get sick at the hospital than actually their illness or whatever they came for with it. And so I think it's beautiful, and I think the church is strong. I think it's vibrant. I think that it's fulfilling. We're fulfilling what the mission that we were sent to fulfill is. So I'm a pro-church guy. I love the church, and I love what the church globally stands for and does. I think. I love what Dr. Wright said about especially in the political context. I think it's our responsibility to have influence in all the seven spheres of society: arts and entertainment, business, education, government, media, and then obviously church. And I think that globally, I think that the church is doing that. So I think there's a lot of great things that are happening with the church.
Ivory,
Same
what's the church
question.
doing right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so a lot of things. A lot of things are going right at church.
Give
What
me the one that sticks out most to you, because we're gonna cover a lot
I
of
was
it.
gonna say, I was gonna echo community, but in the sense of, I think the church is still the place for people who love God and feel like that requires something from their life, because people say they love God and they serve him, but they don't feel that requires anything from their life. But for the people of God who's understanding that loving God requires something for your life, the church is the place that drives that through community. The church is the place that reminds you of what that is supposed to look like and becomes a vehicle for people to live out their God-given purpose inside a community with accountability, with conviction, with all of those things. Like, the church is going to be the way, to me, that you're most successful in living out your God-given purpose.
I like what you just said in terms of this idea that there is a requirement, and many times that is the missing set of information that people come away from church with not having. Right? I do believe, I love this idea that there is something required of you. There is a cost to this relationship that the church offers, and it's something that we all can afford to pay. Right? So I love that idea. That's a great idea.
One thing I was thinking of, what the church is doing right. The church is a place that still offers hope. And I know
Right.
sometimes people even look at hope like it's a bad thing. It's not a blind hope, but it's a hope that's actually based in substance. So especially if you look at the world the way it is right now, if you look at the world on the outside socially, or if you just look at your individual life, a lot of times we can feel hopeless in situations and just day-to-day life. But in every facet of life, the church still shows you there's a plan for you to get to a better place. So
Right.
that's what I think. Okay, so let me ask this question. And anybody feel free, anybody feel free to jump in on this. What is it that if anything, what is it that the church may have been missing at one point in time, or they weren't right, they weren't quite there, or they had their perspective on something was a little jacked up, that at one point in time you weren't the proudest of it, but now you say, I'm happy that the church has come around in this area, and we are righting the ship when it comes to kind of, we were a little wayward. What is, anybody jump in?
Well, I think that the church is continually evolving in who we're supposed to be and what the church is supposed to be. I fully believe that we're going in one full circle to get back to the church's original intent, right? So as we are continuing on this journey, I think that we're learning what it is that he wants the church to be, who it is that he's called his people to be. And so I believe that it's a process within itself. But I personally believe that we're making one full circle to get back to the original intent of the church. If you really study church history and see what church has began, you can see that we're getting revelation of certain things that they already had back then, right? And so I believe that we're going in one full circle to get back to God's original intent for the church.
Okay.
I would jump in and say, and of course, I mean, I've been going to the same church for 20 years, and I'm not just a visit a bunch of churches type of person, but I would say I've
Stay
seen.
at one church. I don't do no church hopping. Go ahead. That's a proof. That's a proof line. Go ahead.
But I would say in the area of works righteousness, I feel like many churches have done some really great work, not preaching that you are literally working your way into heaven by, not doing things. And so I've seen progress in that area in a lot of different denominations and churches. Of course, that's not
You
across the
saying that
board, but
they
I've seen progress.
more so moved away from works-based salvation.
Yeah.
Overall.
I think it's been some progress in that area.
Been progress.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Anybody else?
I think the area my brother, he used how the church is evolving. What I really love about the modern day church is that our main objective is the Great Commission. That is what we do. We're not going to get away from marking, maturing, and developing disciples. We would never get away from that. But I'm glad to see the church has learned how to not only do spiritual business, they're knowing how to do business community-wise. And that is what's really evolving today. And if you live in the community where I live in, it's hard for people of color to go rent out space. And so we're seeing more churches getting away from building a building that's only used once a week or twice a week. That's foolish. That's a waste of money. And so now we build a building that we can give Black folks power, that now you got a barbershop, beauty shop, weightlifting, Black defensive driving school. Now we don't have to go ask nobody, can we lease your space? Negroes got their own space that they can lease, and we do business with ourselves. So we feed them spiritually Sunday and Wednesday, but at the same time, that building is open all week because now we're doing work that we're touching people in their own profession. So the church is getting better about doing business, not just having a big building that's open twice a week. That's a waste of people's time. You're a bad steward if you do that.
It's interesting you say that, because I want to actually give a shout out to Bishop, because that is a concept that he really I used to not think about, because in growing up, having been in church my whole life, I used to think, man, how sacrilege is it to be having all of these other things going on in the church. But Bishop, in my mind, for me, in my personal experience, has really been kind of a front runner and a forerunner in rethinking how the church should function in much exactly the way that you're talking about, Dr. Wright. And I think that that's really impressive that we can be on this call and hear it, even from me, for somebody else saying this is what we should have been doing, and now we are making progress toward that. I think that's really cool.
I love that. I'll just jump in. I love the word that was used, the evolution. I think that's the beauty of the church, is that it's evolving. And the church isn't a monolith, right? Everybody on here is Black. but there's more that, Black people are, a small percentage of the American population relative other groups. And so while that may be the paradigm from which we see it, the church is a big global thing. I mean, it's much bigger than us. It's bigger than Austin. It's bigger than, of course, we were in Denver for years, and now we moved our headquarters here to Atlanta, but it's so much bigger. And I think that evolution is amazing to be seen, because again, I think the impact that's able to be had in people's lives, down to, again, as you mentioned, business, politics, etc. I think that evolution is so necessary. For example, the amount of people, we just crossed 1,050 people today that have given their lives to the Lord so far this year, 12,000 in our history since we started. And a lot of those people, out of the 1,000 so far this year, have never been in a building. And so we got into this thing of really tapping into the power of hybrid and all of that. And so as part of that evolution to where you're reaching people who might not step foot in a building. So you have the flip side, people who may not ever desire to do that, but they're still able to get the benefits of receiving nourishment from a spiritual standpoint, pragmatic standpoint, and then not just creating community within the confines of a facility, but then creating community within the confines of online, which really, the number one epidemic they say in for humans today is it's not a sickness, it's loneliness. That people are lonely, and so I think there's so much beauty in the evolution that is happening in the church, and I love what Pastor said about how that's constantly happening.
Right.
Do we get? I'll go down in categories. Is anything else anybody want to add in as far as what the church is doing right? Because I got some categories. Let's, tell me if this. I'm gonna ask you first.
Okay, I'm listening.
Praise and worship. What's the church doing right in terms of praise and worship?
I'm gonna stick with the theme of evolution, even though I have some gripes in this area. When we're not gonna go gripey on this one. I will say that I am noticing churches trying to make everybody happy, not just, okay, these are the older people, this is the way they've always wanted to listen to music. It's like, let's try to incorporate some different, more modern things. The only gripe sometimes is for praise and worship, churches could just be 10, 20 years behind what's actually out and happening as far as praise and worship, because we just got some songs from the 80s and 90s. We just don't want to let go. I get it. So, but on the good side, I can see that even though they're not letting go of them songs from the 80s and 90s, they're trying to find ways to interject some more modern things as well. I think there's still a long way to go in that area, but I've seen some growth.
Okay.
I kind of like the idea too of what I've and this has been happening for a while, but I think is a good thing. And kind of the same vein is what Ivory mentioned, but I do like this idea of diversifying, having multiple, how do I want to say that? Multiple offerings of music, in the sense you still have that choir that does really great choir music, but at the start of the service, a lot of them that have just 5 or 6 people really just focusing on that praise and worship facet before moving into the big kind of choir arena. I really like that, because I think in much the same way it provides an opportunity for everybody to get a piece of what they like.
People really thinking about this praise and worship, y'all.
I'm gonna be honest, I really don't want to touch it myself. I want to stay as positive
Oh, okay.
as possible.
You see, I really tried to work mine in a.
Yeah, I don't know. I almost get the feeling it's like we scratching to find something positive. I think we've been conditioned to point out the negative so much that we haven't been solution based, right, and figure out ways we should approach things to add to the positive things to the church or the things that we want to see change. And so I don't really necessarily
because a lot of us, you know, have what is it called, like battered woman syndrome.
We do. Yeah, we do. And one thing about it, I never talk about church issues publicly. That's just one of my pet peeves. I believe that we are Christ, and as a community, we should discuss our issues amongst each other, right? Because we all know that we issues, but I believe that we're all family and that we should discuss those type of things in private settings, right? And I don't know. I just think that I kind of move away from the negative conversations, and I just believe that as the body, we need to be more solution based, right? Point out our issues and then say, well, how do we move forward? I don't think we have enough platforms where we have those discussions.
Oh, my apologies, Pastor Court.
No. It's not. No. It's
I'll
not
be going in heavy.
but I mean, I'm talking about on every Facebook page, you can find someone talking about what's wrong with the church, right? We all know. We all know the different issues, but very rarely do you see a platform where folks say, these are our issues. Now, what do we do as a community moving forward?
Right.
You know, how do we?
You know, I do agree with that. What I try to do is not the good, bad, indifferent, and whatever. I want things to come from a space of knowledge.
Right.
So what I don't like is people who show up to church once every Easter and then they got these strong opinions about the church. No, actually bring some people in who are well versed in church culture and they actually live it. And they say it from a place of what they are a part of versus an outsider.
And they love it. Yeah, they're committed to it. Yeah.
Right. Dr. Bright, I don't know if you I don't know what's going on. Pastor Friedman trying to get in, and for some reason he's not showing up. I don't know if you could resend him the link. I'm trying to get you in here, Pastor Free. I don't know what's going on.
Let me do that right now.
Pastor Free said he got notes. He said he got notes and everything. He's trying to.
Hold on, Pastor. I'm working on it.
Ooh, okay. So now this one, I don't know. You may have to reach on this one.
We already been reaching now.
Let's say praise and worship. Okay, so all right, we're gonna take a quick time out. Has the ensemble culture gone too far for you, or what is it that you feel that you like us to get back to?
What do you mean the ensemble culture? I mean,
I
think I know what you mean, but help me.
I said several years ago, I think Israel ruined gospel music because once he came out and got popular, then the choirs, everybody hung the robes up, went away, and then it wasn't no more choirs, it was just ensembles. That's why I really appreciate Dr. Wright, because if you want to hear some good church choir music, good Lord, it's wonderful. But I did make that accusation a long time. It's like, yeah, we doing away with the robes, the choir music, all of this. We got eight man ensemble, and then that's the new praise and worship, and that's all we do now. That's what I was saying about it.
I love it.
Pastor Free, I just sent you in the Facebook Messenger.
Oh, okay, I
the
see
link.
him. Here we go. We got him.
All right.
Me and you couldn't have argued about this because I like choirs, but I love the praise team, the ensemble. I prefer it. So I'm like, you say ruin the choir, I say helped us along our way.
Okay.
So we got two different opinions about it.
Okay.
Why though? Ivory, since you say that, why?
Because she ain't play no instruments. If you a drummer, then you want that old school church music to play the drums too.
The part he just said, old school. We was in the choir, like I said, it's the year 2000. We still singing them choir songs from the 80s.
That old
it
Milton
was
Brunson, yeah.
music was evolving, taking a new modern thing, and the choir thing to me was still just a little older, and I think it's a place for it, but I think it was time to mix it together. I don't think it should have just stayed choir because I think we need to evolve.
Before we move forward,
Okay.
Pastor Free, I know you said you got some notes. What's right with the church? What's right with the church, sir?
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I hope and pray everybody's doing well. Listen, y'all was gonna let me in here if we do this all over again, because I left church. I was sitting next to my pastor, and I got up in the middle of a sermon and said I had to get to this podcast. So there needs to be ocular proof that I wasn't lying to my pastor. But anyway, so right there, what we're talking about, music and praise team. I grew up a church boy in traditional church. I love music. I don't like listening to the choir anymore for whatever reason. I just kind of grew out of it. But I'm very fond of the praise and worship movement either. I don't know what it is. But I will say that in the church, to the topic, in the church, in most churches, the music is like top tier because we're gifted people. And so if you want to hear and feel good music, the church is typically where it is. Now, of course, there are some churches that are just kind of trying to make it, and you know what I'm saying, you got to whatever. But at the end of the day, people pay hundreds of dollars to go hear music from talent that is not nearly as gifted. I think we're loose with the word anointed. So I'm going to say anointed, but I am going to say you can see some gift and some talent, especially in the Black church. And yeah, so I just feel like we minimize the giftedness.
True.
And a lot of these artists, they got their start, their training, their development in the church.
True.
And now,
Right.
you know, we minimize them in the church, and then we'll pay them millions of dollars in the world. That's crazy. But at the end of the day, let's keep it 100 that in the Black church, especially, there's gift and talent that's out of this world. Yeah.
That's a good point.
And I'll say on a side note, Ivory, just like I was talking about Dr. Wright with the choir, Pastor Free has one of the best praise teams in the city. They praise team, they kill it. So I'll tell you that next time you come in town, I'm gonna have to.
Amen.
Yeah. Now this one I'm interested in. I don't know if there has to be a reach here because y'all got to fill in some blanks for me. Bishop Foreman, I'll run to you, and then we just ask the question around. What's right with the church when it comes to prayer?
Great question. I would think simply one that we pray. I think two, that the principles are there. And I go back to this thing of evolution about how prayer is approached. But I also love the fact that because we're not a monolith, you know, I come from, you know, I was born in Denver, raised in Memphis. So in Memphis, the family church was St. Jude Missionary Baptist Church, and then it was Bishop G. Patterson. So two very different worlds. And then in Denver, it was a non-denominational church that was led by a white pastor with predominantly black congregations where I started. And it was Pastor Dennis Leonard. And so I started on staff when I was 12. That being said, those were very different worlds and very different experiences and very different approaches to prayer. And I love, I think, even in the discussion about music, as a musician who did start as a drummer, who went to keys and all of that and did choral stuff, I think the whole beauty of when you say right is really going to be subjective to that person's desires and what they like and what they have a taste for. And so for prayer, some people, I remember the first time I went to a prayer gathering, my pastor now does this 12 hours of prayer thing. And I said, y'all pray for 12 hours? Coming from a non-denominational world, we didn't do that. Like there's a clock, like, you know what I mean? Like there's a certain amount of time you're supposed to have. And, you know, you need to be timely and that type of a thing. But it is one of the most joyous things for me to do. So I think when it comes to prayer, I think one, that it's practiced, two, that it's preached, and then three, that it's pointed, but then four, that it is, again, it's not a monolith. So everybody's going to do it different. But I think the whole goal is conversation with God, and getting people to do that is a good thing all day, every day, regardless of the methodology somebody uses to get the message across.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let me jump in quickly.
Go ahead.
I
Yeah.
got the thought on the top of my head. When you say what's right with prayer, I'm completely piggybacking on that. It happens because in what other context of life is anyone encouraging you to have an active communication with God? There really is no other context. You could go to the club meeting, you can join the sports thing, you can do all of these positive things in life where there's no push for you to actively communicate with God. Church is the place that encourages you to actively communicate with God. No matter how a church goes about encouraging active communication with God, it is the place. So that is always going to be going well, that people still have a place that's continually telling them, you need to talk to God and you need to try to listen as he talks back, because that's not the message of people out of church who say they love God.
Oh, good. Thank you for reframing that for me, Ivory, because I was struggling for a second.
I'm not struggling. I'm like, I got all my good. When you say it might be a reach, I'll be thinking, I ain't got no reaches. Ain't no reaches over here.
Okay, so let me ask this, and we can stay on the pot, because let me get this all out of my head. Especially we have all these pastors on there. Does any pastor have a more challenging time getting people to show up to prayer meetings? Like, I remember when I was growing up, we used to have prayer meetings, and that it's not as prevalent as it once was, and from what I see. But I don't know. I got a bunch of pastors on here. Somebody give me some input on that. If prayer is as important to people as it once was.
I want to jump in because I believe sometimes prayer can be something that's more difficult to get people to engage because of it's not as entertaining as a concert or a musical or maybe even a Sunday worship that includes a sermon. I will say in our church, a couple of years ago, we started a virtual prayer revival at the beginning of the year, and it's just online. People Zoom in, and it's one of the most powerful times of our year just for that. Now, we do prayer and praise every 5th Wednesday, and that's hit or miss. I ain't gonna lie. But the prayer revival that starts the year is pretty cool. To the original question, I'm not gonna let Bishop Foreman outdo me, especially if he's not Baptist, and he was real alliterated with his piece. He was real alliterated, and I was thinking about that. But the truth of the matter is, I think one of the best things about prayer in church has to do with the education of prayer itself. Like, a lot of people struggle with prayer because they say, well, I don't know how to pray. I don't know what to say. And this is not a new problem. The disciples came to Jesus with that question, teach us how to pray. And I know I've been preaching since I was 9 years old. And as a boy, I had an example of what prayer looked like. My mom prayed, she taught me how to pray privately, but I was able to see what prayer looked like publicly. And so I came up understanding what prayer meant, what it looked like, what it sounds like. I'm not talking about the performance aspect, but the breakdown of the things that I should do when I pray. And that gave me confidence in my personal and public prayer life. And I think the church does a great job of that. Maybe I don't know how to pray, but I'm sitting in the pews and I'm listening to other people pray after I get past that initial intimidation that I can't pray like so-and-so. And I start really listening to the heart, the sincerity of it, and then listening to the teaching on what prayer looks like and what it does and what it means and the components of prayer. Then I become educated on that. So education and encouragement and example, I can do it too, Foreman.
You got it, man. You got it, man.
I came to cut up. Y'all too
Okay.
quiet tonight. This the one I thought we was finna have a good time tonight.
No,
Y'all-
Chuck, you be looking at me like I'm crazy when I cuts up, so I'm trying to be good tonight.
Well, Bright, I'm not looking like you're crazy. That's- But since you the one that let me in, I'm gonna be good.
All right.
Right.
And I guess to add on to what I guess Ivory and Pastor Bree said, I think what's right with the church, they are teaching that prayer doesn't only have to look one way.
Right.
That prayer, you don't have to come into the church and be down on your knee in a certain spirit. You can pray in your car, you can pray at home, you can communication, just the education on what the different ways communication with God looks like. I think that's definitely something that the church is doing right. So
I want to add to that intercession, right? Because the reality of it is, because the church prays, the believers not only benefit, but the unbelievers benefit, right? The church has been given the responsibility from heaven to intercede on behalf of the world. So the world benefits from the prayers of the saints.
Yeah, so when we start talking about prayer at the church, we kind of get this kind of confused. The church is the ecclesia. We are the called out believers. So when we start talking about church, I don't believe you need to be running the church trying to pray. You should have already been prayed up. Right. So I'm a big fan of prayer, and I believe in prayer. But I believe all of us as pastors, we will say this: prayer comes from more of a discipleship, what we do with our people to teach them how to pray. When we think about churches, how does church look on Sunday morning when you pray? You have to be intentional. So I can watch any church's worship experience. I can look at a church's program. They got a bulletin. If I see that they sing more songs than they pray, that means they value music than they do prayer. So you have to be intentional as a leader to make sure that people value what God values. My house should be called a house of prayer. And so when I look at our worship script, I want to make sure we are praying more than we're singing. And you have to be intentional. And you got to be intentional on what you're praying about. So we're intentional on the call of worship. We're intentional on that if it's communion. Those are different aspects of prayer. And the problem is we have so many Pharisees within the church that when we do pray, we beat our chest and it's a long prayer and it don't have to be long.
Right.
And so when Pastor Free said it earlier about, we have these midweek service, the church has evolved. We can have a 6 a.m. prayer in the morning that is more effective than us showing up at 6 o'clock at a church and cooking somebody something to eat, right? And so we have to learn how to mobilize prayer to meet people where they are. So that is what's right with the church today, because you're seeing people use social media and different things to mobilize and how people are learning about prayer.
And not I'm not trying to tout all of Bishop's praises here, but it makes me think about like what you do on Mondays. Talk to the panel about like, because you incorporate this teaching about prayer, praying, and just this whole thing. And I think that's been a unique thing, which you go from having 100 people to thousands of people now involved in this this prayer circle thing that you got going on Monday. So talk about how that evolved and came to be.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. And it's that's just it. I love what was mentioned about that. So we literally do it. We've been doing it now for a little bit on Monday nights for a few years now, and to the point that everybody has made about everything echoed and implemented in that. My whole thing was I used to hear people say prayer life and coming up in church, and I was like, what does that mean? I was like, isn't prayer, if this is a relationship, like how do I only talk like what relationship works where y'all only talk once a week? right?
Right.
Like relationship, this should be a daily thing. I said, but it can't be daily if people aren't taught how to have relationships. Because let's face it, people don't have good natural relationships, right? 50% of first marriages divorce, 67 second marriages, 73% third marriages. So we built it in just as part of our church culture. So for us, Sundays, of course, Sundays are higher than others. But prayer and Bible study are not too far behind. We just made it to where this is a lifestyle. So it's just incorporated into what we do as a church. It's incorporated in what we do as a people. And so people be literally, they're fired up, ready to go. Don't let prayer start 60 seconds late, because I'm gonna have 400 inboxes. Everything okay? What's going on? What's going on? And it's built into the culture. I love what Pastor Free said. Like it's built into the culture, and you can reach people from everywhere. But to every point that everybody's made, I think that's one of the things that's been done right, because it doesn't require us going down to a building. It doesn't require what I think the greatest thing the pandemic taught us, and is still teaching us, is that a lot of what we thought was required to be effective is not.
Mm-hmm.
It's just extra.
That's interesting. I like it.
Okay. Preaching. What is church doing right when it comes to preaching?
Q, you asking these questions like
Yeah.
like
How you
like
want
they
me to
gonna
ask
be
the
problem. I don't know, man. I just
That's the way
it's
you
just
took it.
interesting. Like
Yeah.
it's like I know y'all got whatever. I mean, but anyway, it's cool. Go ahead.
I don't know why you took it that way. That's not
Yeah.
that's not the way I intended it.
It's coming off that way.
Yes, it's the tone of the whole.
Yeah.
But
No,
I would
no,
say
not the preaching part. Now the prayer, I had questions about the prayer part and the praise and words, but the preaching part I actually didn't have no questions about that. But I just wanted to get your input. That's all.
let me for clarity. Is this conversation about the Big C Church, the Universal Church, or are we talking about the Black Church?
There you go.
When I got on here, I heard Dr. Wright talking about Negroes, so I didn't know where we was going with this. But that's my brother. That's my brother. I know that it was fair game. So I just want to know before I respond.
I want everyone to include Universal, and then you narrow it down as much as you want to as well.
I think that's a very important distinction, especially when it comes to
that's
preaching.
a big.
For me.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, come
Go
on.
ahead,
Give us,
Dr.
what's
Wright.
give us the differences,
because I have a problem there that this show is not addressing right now, so I can't really comment about that because I have a problem with.
We go wherever you want to, or you trying to stay off of the
I'm trying to
stay on the right
positive.
train.
Yeah, I'm trying to stay, but
I know where
because
you're
I
going.
think when you talk about Universal Church, that becomes predominantly associated with white folks, right? In the broad spread, and I think that they are preaching something completely. I heard a man on TikTok the other day, and I'm sure it was probably maybe it wasn't. I'll take that back. It wasn't. It was recent, and he was talking about how morally sound the current administration is, and how it is the duty, and that he preaches that at his church, it is the duty of all pastors to insist that their members are backing this administration in all the decisions, and he preaches this, and I thought, I'm never going to preach that ever. Never.
Right. Ooh, that's a question that I had too.
So when Pastor Free says, how narrow is this scope, I think that that's really a legitimate question that has to be answered, because I think the message that's being preached is very different depending on what church.
Dr. Bright,
can
you give that umbrella to the white church as a whole?
You're not going to like my response to that. And I'm going to say,
I don't care.
Most likely, the majority, sure. Not everybody, because you can't speak in absolutes.
Sure,
but
of course.
I would say the majority. I think of evangelical Christians, i.e., white Christians, would agree with that assessment. 100%. I believe that.
And Quentin, I was gonna say this so we can stay on what's right. Is I think we should keep it narrow to the African American church, just because I just think there is such a gulf in how we operate right now. My answers aren't for the church at large. My answers are for what I know about ministries in church, and that's currently African American churches, though.
Okay. So let me, before we go back to the preaching aspect of it, this is one question, and this can go broad or it can go more specific. What's right with the church in terms of unity and church fellowship when it comes to churches fellowshipping with one another, coming across the aisles, whether it's one church to another, different denominations, different cultures? Like what's going right with the church when it comes to how we interact with, supposedly we're supposed to be one body. So how's that going?
I sit on the board of ecumenical group called Christ Together for Greater Austin. It's a national movement, but it has city branches. And I know we have been very intentional about trying to bring about unity in the body of Christ. And I have seen my white and Hispanic brothers be intentional about trying to make it happen. And so I think that is a positive. There are some that try to place the banner of Jesus above every other dividing entity.
Right.
I will say that when we live in these United States, politics makes unity a big challenge, not impossible. Because as long as we can sit and talk about Jesus and salvation and love, maybe even caring for the poor in a way that is convenient, we are one church. We good. Even though the music may differ, preaching styles may differ, as long as we can keep the main thing, we're good. But the problem is we do live in a society that is largely driven by economy, and politics become so divisive, and they are no longer dividing just the country or the races. They are dividing the church.
Right.
I agree with you, Pastor. I agree with you 100%.
Oh, okay. I was about to say I didn't know if Dr. Bright agreed with that. As far as
I agree with that 100%.
Oh, I'm surprised. Okay. I was, he just said, hey, as long as you love Jesus and I love Jesus, then we'd be all right. I was like, okay.
No.
I didn't say that.
That's not what he said. That's not what he said at all. At least that's not what I heard. Let me say
that's not what I said.
Okay. All right, good.
I heard inkling. Did you hear inkling of that? Like, where, we don't have to have practice culturally the same in worship, but if we have the same base belief, then we could still be in fellowship.
He said we could still have a conversation.
Oh, okay. I guess they ain't the same. All right. They're just a conversation. Okay.
That's what I heard. We could still converse.
Everybody is looking as confused as me. So Q, I think that was on you, brother.
That's what I told him. I said, no. I think he was just saying it's still a conversation is still open. If we still, but I don't know if it was that he was saying that we all
okay. So Pastor Free, let me roll back to you real quick on this before we go more narrow. Do you see that bridge narrowing or the gap narrowing from the culture divide?
No. Unfortunately, I believe under this administration that gulf is widening.
I agree with that as well. I think it's widening.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hey, thank you for the honesty. As we go back to the preaching aspect of it, and now we narrowing it back in because, and I mean that was definitely a fair question because there's two trains. It's two different trains going two different directions when you talk about what's right with preaching from one culture to the next. But in terms of our culture, what's going right, what's right with the church in terms of preaching?
It
I'm
is
gonna-
still. Go ahead.
I'm just doing a quick blurb, and this is just, of course, my personal experience. But what's right about preaching is that is like discipleship. Like somebody has committed their life to get up, 2, 3, 4 times a week, give people a word that continues to build them year over year over year. At least that's my experience. And then you find yourself knowing how your life with God is supposed to operate, knowing how you're supposed to operate with the other people in your life. And I mean, that's all from getting the preached word, week in, week out, and somebody committing to learn to teach you. I guess that's my big picture about what's right with it. I just think it's amazing when people can pick a worthy leader and really sit under them and learn the things they need to learn about the word of God and themselves, and really get discipled under that preaching. So
I would add really quickly that I think even with the social the information age that we're in, I also feel that pastors definitely come more prepared than maybe they did once upon a time. Like people do their homework, because you got to do your homework. You gotta, you can't just wing it off the, just come off the cuff. You actually have to prepare what you're doing. And I see that in a lot of preaching. But go ahead, Pastor Free, what you gonna say? Or anybody?
I was just gonna say that preaching itself is still God's choice. Paul, 1 Corinthians 1, called it the foolishness of preaching. It is still God's choice of the instrument that is used so that people come to salvation. No matter how culture changes, what preaching looks like will evolve, has evolved, and has changed. Some people are preaching through podcasts. I've done some preaching through music and preaching through movies and the whole nine. So I don't think that preaching any longer is bound to a person standing behind a pulpit.
Ooh, yes.
Giving a monologue. They're narrative sermons. Now, like it's a whole lot of different approaches to preaching, but the conveying of the gospel message is still God's choice as to how to bring lost men and women into salvation. And I believe the church, whether we're doing that well or not, the fact that we maintain preaching as the instrument that God chose is a blessing and is a positive thing in and of itself. I do say in the Black church, which was part of my clarity for the question, like, you're not going to find more creative, more interesting, even bad sermons in the Black church can be entertaining, if nothing else. And so I go back to the talent and the giftedness. And I'm not making a mockery of it, I promise you I'm not. But you have to have something to capture the minds and hearts of people with the word of God. There's a layer of something that just the common person doesn't have. You have to be chosen by God to do this work. And we can tell when a person has not been chosen. And we can tell when they have not equipped themselves. And there's no preparation. There's no anointing. And so when it is done in alignment with the Spirit of God and with a pure heart to reach the lost, there's nothing more powerful, I think, in the world than good gospel-centered preaching in whatever the presentation looks like, in my opinion.
I build on what Pastor Free said. A noted white scholar in a major academic institution, he said if there's going to ever be a revival in America, it's going to come to the Black church because of the personality of the preaching of the Black preacher. Unless God changes, the Black preacher has always and will own that space. I'm not being a racist. I'm not being biased, but that is a gift that God has always given us. And what makes the Black church so unique today with Black preachers today is we have access to stuff today academically, through social media, through the internet, that we can be more educated than in the past. We don't have to depend on somebody to give us secondhand information when we can get it our own self. And that is the beauty today, is that the Black preachers now not only have the unique skill set, but now they bring now the academic mindset to the pulpit. And so it's just not pure entertainment anymore. It's about, I can give you sacred rhetoric. At the same time, I can move you with passion, but yet I am centered on the word of God, because that is something we have been gifted with.
Dr. Wright, I have a follow-up question for you. Do you think it's two-part? And what I say by that, like Pastor Free said, the pastors are anointed and they're gifted, but also the people. We are a receptive people. The way we interact in service is something that, if you go to other churches, you may not see that same type of interaction. So the energy feeds itself because of the response of the people as well.
That is correct.
Okay.
We are call and response people. Every church does not do call and response, but you can still know if you tracking whether it's not a call and response church. There are some indicators that they will show you. And I believe if you take a look, when you look at, it's more right with the Black church than wrong. And our white brothers, they really pay attention to what we do all the time.
And imitate.
Yeah, and
I was about to say, that's exactly what I'm about to say, and imitate.
Yeah. And so we spend so much time criticizing our uniqueness and our giftedness, where we don't really have to do that, because I would say it, it's brothers on this call right now. They have the it factor, and it came from God. And God is using them in a way that God has blessed them. They have the gift, and people see that, and we minimize it. The problem is that we don't celebrate our other brother's gift within the body, while somebody else is secretly watching and won't ever tell us we're doing a good job. But we got the it factor in the Black church. Make no mistake about that.
I think to Dr. Wright's point, historically speaking, the Black preacher was used to kind of maintain order amongst slaves and all of that. And I still believe that if the Black preacher were to use that influence properly, it's also the vehicle by which we come out of whatever oppression or secondhand status that we are in. I think the church is still that vehicle. There are so many organizations that are popping up for the sake of civil rights and that type of thing. Nothing will ever replace the Black church. We may weaken it because we're spreading out our resources and that type of thing, but nothing will ever replace it. And so that preaching moment is huge. And now that there's an understanding of, and maybe an embracing of the conversation concerning mental health and all of that stuff, and it's starting to show up in the preaching, like Dr. Wright said, more education. Now I'm gonna be scared. I'm scared that preachers are about to start doing this AI preaching. That bothers me. I don't want you,
sir. AI preaching.
I don't want you to ask Chat GPT, give me a sermon about prayer, and then you just read what he said, then try to tune up at the end. The devil is a lie, and that's some. Never mind. That concerns me, but anyway, go ahead.
I was just gonna. I got to do my history blurb.
It's gonna happen.
The slave uprisings were normally the preacher too. So you got the preacher. Some preachers keeping them under control, but the preachers was also getting them to uprise too. So that historically has always been the same power.
Hey, Pastor Free, I just put what you said. I said, give me a sermon about prayer with 3 points that alliterate. Number 1, the power of prayer. Number 2, the posture of prayer. Number 3, the persistence of prayer. I'm gonna send you the notes so you can use it. All right?
Keep it. I still lay on my face. I still lay on my face and hear from the Lord. But I promise you, somebody is listening to this podcast tonight, and they're gonna preach it. Yeah, they're gonna preach just what you said.
Yeah.
And it's gonna preach.
Oh no, go on. They've already done it. You could probably look in there, and they got the bullet points and everything.
Yeah.
And it happens.
Were you about to say, Ivory?
I just said it's gonna preach, but that was it. I was just being funny.
Saying it's gonna preach. Okay, so with 13 minutes, I'm gonna have to make sure we have everybody out of here. Thank you for your time. And make sure you share this with everyone. We need to everybody get the negativity. Let's spread the positivity. Let people see what's going right with the church. Now, I got a couple more little points, and then Pastor Free, if you still got more of your notes, then feel free to interject them as well. I want to make sure you get all your notes out.
I got my list, brother. Go ahead.
Okay, hey, if you need to touch on something on the list before I go to the next one, go ahead.
No, can I just read my list, and then if any of it is worth conversation, then I literally put it's the only vehicle of salvation that the church is. And then I put the history and heritage factor, because I'm thinking if we're talking about the African American church, we preserve history, and essentially we should be responsible to make sure we stay tethered to our history. It's a unified organism for impact. When we galvanize and when we work together, there's so much we can get done in community and government policy, so on and so forth. It's a place for community and belonging. That when the church is healthy, it's a place where people can come and find acceptance, find encouragement, that type of thing. Kind of that Cheers model. Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name. And then a place of education. Like I said, we're moving to a place now where there's more education about health. We're educating now, as Dr. Rice said, gyms and all this kind of stuff. All these things are kind of one-stop shop where the church can be influential in educating people and empowering them to kind of live a holistic life. And so those are just things that stood out in my mind while I was driving from East Austin, that I don't want us to think that we have to dig so deep to find what's good, because there is so much that's positive about the church, to the point to where I get extremely offended. It's like, and I know the church is not my bride, it's Christ's bride, but I'm married to Kayla. And if you can say all the wonderful things about Kayla that you want, and I won't say a word, but once you start tearing her down, you're going to have a problem with me. And I feel the same way about the church. I know that the church is not perfect, but how long are we going to talk about that? When are we going to start shining a light on the fact that the church has held our communities together? The church has kept people from who were going to be divorced together. The church has kept some children off the street. It's just so much. And I do think that there is an agenda that is not just spiritual, but also political. That self-hatred component. That we just thrive off of tearing our own selves down, and that's crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, you got a couple directions that I wanted to touch on, but because I want to touch definitely something about that. But let me ask this about first. Politics, and I ain't talking about us versus the other side. What is the church doing right in terms of making sure that our voice and our agenda is infiltrating into Congress and laws and local government? What is the church doing right in pertaining to active movement?
In recent years, we've definitely become more active in encouraging the right to vote. A lot of churches are even registering voters on site. You're hearing more and more over the pulpit encouraging people to participate in the process. So that's one thing for sure.
Mm-hmm. I'll speak for one of the things we did in Denver. Denver was 4% African American. One of the things we did was leveraged our relationships with those in political power. And so to me, full disclosure, I'm not a Democrat or Republican. To me, I won't use the language I used to explain it to one politician who was running for mayor, but I said at the end of the day, I'll use better language for this show. There's a horse and there's water. And I said, I'll just tell you that we're not the horse. And so we approached politicians from the perspective of, if what you're doing isn't advancing our people, I could care less who you are, what you stand for, because you can have a stance, but that stance doesn't translate into policy. What you believe doesn't translate into policy. So, in the height of this was a few years ago, but in the height of the George Floyd protests, I lived in downtown Denver. I could see the protests going on. I made a call to our state senator at the time. His name is James Coleman. I said, James, my assignment is not to have a picket out front. That's not what I do. What I do is I sit in the rooms of levers of power, and we craft a policy that's going to impact the people. And so I said, we need something. He said, Bishop, we got a bill. They ran it by me. We introduced that. And within a week and a half, Denver, with its 4% African American, had the nation's first comprehensive police reform and accountability act. Because to me, everybody's got a different assignment. Back to my whole theme of we're not a monolith. Somebody else, their assignment might be out front. Somebody else, their assignment might be getting people registered to vote. My assignment was they send me the bills, I redlined them, and so I have influenced policy that people don't know anything about. I don't want to be at the bill signing. I don't want them to know that I've been doing now they're gonna know, but I want them to know that I've been doing what I've been doing, because for me, we're having that impact that's impacting people's lives at a very granular, pragmatic level.
Good stuff. Anybody else want to touch that before I touch something else?
Just think about what's happening with Target right now.
I saw that. I read that, and I was like, look at there.
Yeah.
Look at there.
Pastor Free, you mentioned something in because you talked about you were a little you feel some type of way about some of the shots that's being taken at the bride. I do want to ask, because and this is my initial thought. A lot of the shots that we hear are usually from people on the other side of the fence, or disgruntled people on our side of the fence that's kind of sitting on the fence. But it's usually the happy, content lover of the church is usually not the one that's going to get into those type of verbal conversations. What do you feel that the church is doing right? And this is a question for anybody. What do you feel that the church is doing right in terms of how we deal with those outsiders who, throw the little darts? What are we doing right in how we deal with them?
I think, of course, our response is different, but I think for the most part, the church, I'm not going to say just takes it, but we have not tried to return the same level of hatred and vitriol that we've received over the years, which is hard. I ain't gonna lie. A lot of the time, the Lord saves some of the folks with the most jacked up past attitudes, and we could pop off real quick. But when I think of just people that I know have kind of just said, keep your head down, do what you've been called to do, not return that hatred, but to love anyway. And that's something that only the Spirit of God calls, right? You know that you have been changed and transformed by the love of Jesus Christ. I don't go off,
right?
Even though I want to go off, something within me is holding me and helping me to love. Even God is so awesome that He will create these situations and circumstances where people who have been persecutors and people who have been naysayers and people who have been slanderers will have to come to you for help. Mm-hmm. And I know of so many instances, my own personal life and so many others, that have had to humbly respond with the love of Jesus Christ to the same people that were hateful and vindictive and spiteful, and social media has given microphones and voices to fools. So the whole nine. I think that the church does, in general, a pretty good job about not like popping off just because we've been pooped on. That was a terrible way to close it, but y'all understood what I meant.
No, we got it.
But that was good alliteration, though.
This quickly too. That the church is just good at in general is we not like a job or a sorority or fraternity. Nobody's going through your Facebook profile to see if you can be a member or checking how many hateful things you said in the past. I mean, The church is literally the place you walk in and you can say, I'm here to be new today and go forward. And everybody's going to say, okay. So I
Right.
think that's one really awesome thing about the church. And even with the naysayers, if you're taught well in church, it's about, like Pastor Free was saying, if you really have the Holy Spirit gonna be telling you as you getting annoyed, this
It's
person
not
is
them.
struggling.
And we
It's
not
not
wrestling with flesh
them.
and blood. Right.
There's some spirits, there's some things happening.
Right.
This person is having an internal struggle that is showing up as hatred and things. Or this person has a spirit that's making them a distraction and they would love to pull
Right.
you in. So it can cause a bigger distraction from the people on the sidelines who want to see how you're going to react.
That's true.
And I think that Holy Ghost filled Christians, right, do a good job of just taking it, because we know the soul is way more important than me getting a win right now.
That's right.
So
That's good.
Right. That's right.
Really quickly, accountability. What is the church doing right in terms of how we hold even our own accountable when there's something wrong, or we don't want to be, I don't want to throw the Catholic Church out there, but we don't want to be the ones that just tries to cover up mess, but we want to be accountable in all areas. What is the church doing right in terms of accountability?
I was trying to be quiet. Y'all know we're gonna golly. Woo. I grew up in a church. I was a member of one church. I've been a member of one church my entire life, and I'm still a member of that church. And that was, full disclosure, finances and decisions with personnel. We had church business conferences. You could ask questions. I don't have much to compare to in the corporate world because I've never been in corporate world. I've literally been in the church my entire life. But to me, that's cool. I can look and see itemized on the budget where all of the dollars go. I wish the world understood that, because they all just assume we giving all the money and the pastor's taking it home and buying Bentleys and all. I'd be like, man, y'all, wow. And so I think the church is accountable with finances and accountable with business decisions in churches that are legitimate and trying to operate a board. That there's a lot of transparency and accountability that takes place in those ways.
Okay, awesome.
And I think just for my part, we've had this argument so many times at this point, Quentin. I'll just put it back out there again that I don't think pastors are responsible for holding anybody accountable besides them and their own congregations. So I don't think there's any lack of holding people accountable, because I just don't find it necessary that they do it in any public way that I would ever see. So I don't, we've had this argument. I know you don't completely agree,
Okay.
but I don't.
Okay, as long as we had
I
it.
don't have an answer for that because I don't agree.
Okay. Well, as long as you said you are established that we disagree, then I ain't got to go back into it. Okay, good. Hey,
Well, right now, the world is holding us accountable. You can't do too much of nothing without being a viral clip.
Well, again, okay. So again, let me use a quick example. If a police officer does something inappropriate or illegal to a citizen, do you expect other police officers to stand up, speak against the actions and behaviors of that rogue officer, and say that that's not right, that's not what we stand for?
Not public, Yeah.
That's where you and I differ.
I do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So okay.
Is your question, should we expect that or do we expect it? I just want to be clear on how you asked the question.
Well, I guess so. That goes back to the root of Ivory and I difference, because she doesn't believe that, I use another example as a police officer speaking out against bad cops, whereas I think that they should speak out against other bad cops. She doesn't. So in the same likewise manner, if a pastor or a preacher is doing something that's to the detriment of the whole body, or even from an appearance standpoint, if they're doing something that's off, then I would, under the eyes and ears of another preacher, I would expect them to step up and say, no, that's not
That
right.
That can be so subjective, though, Q. And I think that's where the danger of that comes in, because again, so I was telling my wife I don't typically have time to be on the TikTok machine, but I was on it for the other day, and so I happened to scroll through certain things, and there's this one pastor on there who takes aim at everything that another pastor does that he would not do, and so he makes it his goal to criticize everything that this pastor does. And I thought, well, just because that ain't how you roll don't mean that there's a problem with it. And so I think when the expectation is that pastors become police to other pastors, see, my pastor needs to police me. I don't need nobody else policing me. That would be like it's different than saying, hey, brother, hey, have you considered this, that, and the other? But in terms of somebody vocally out there chastising my behavior, that ain't your job. That's my pastor's job. And so anything beyond that creates this situation where you are inviting people, you're inviting confusion, you are inviting animosity, you're inviting tension, when the expectation is that we ought to be out there policing other people. Because again, what I do that you don't do, unless it's something really blatant, it's too subjective to be having somebody else. Pastor Free don't need nobody but his pastor going out there correcting him.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm really referring to, the really blatant things.
Unfortunately, I love the analogy that you're using about the cop, but to me, the law is so clear. And so if there's police brutality, there's illegal behavior taking place, do I think that cop should speak out against it? I don't know what speak out looks like, because hopefully they lose their job and whatever. And you be a good cop by just not doing what they did. That's kind of why I think. But the church is a little different, because it could be perceived as divisive. Right. Just like I said, highlighting and pointing out what somebody else is, where they are in error, unless it's just blatant, right? There are some things that you need to call out. The scripture does say we should mark them, right? Because there are some among us that's just on some, I don't know why I keep wanting to tonight. There are some of us that's just what they do. But I also know that there are some that they're building their own name by constantly attacking people who have a name.
Yeah,
to me, that's whack.
Oh yeah,
that's whack.
Like that.
And so I'm on the fence. I'm on the fence because if I spend all my time trying to highlight what somebody else is doing wrong, I ain't spending none of my time trying to make sure I'm doing right. So I ain't got time to be policing somebody else when the boss sees all of us, and he gon' figure it.
But I think it's two ends of the spectrum. I think it's that person that always calling out the wrong and criticizing pastors. And then I think it's the other end, to where you see your brother in fault or in sin or in error, and we don't say nothing to him, right? So I think it's two extremes, right? So how is it that we can preach to hundreds of people, but I can't tell my brother that, hey, that ain't your wife. You need to go home to your wife, right? And so I'm not judging you, but if I really love you, I'll tell you the truth, right? And I ain't got to be your pastor. I just got to be your brother. And if I really love you, I don't do that publicly, right? I come behind the scenes and I say, hey, bro, I know you love the Lord, but you're getting off a little bit. And I know it may cost our relationship. So I believe in that, and I don't believe it's enough of that, right? Then there's also an extreme where somebody's just, scrolling on timelines, finding something wrong with the church, and this pastor did that. And I don't think you go across, you go through the church with a red marker. I don't agree with that, but I believe that it's two extremes, and we got to meet somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I agree with Pastor Corey there. So because the question is kind of loaded. It's like he said, it's either to this extreme or this extreme.
Right.
But it's with the police officer. We know that he may not come out publicly, but ethically, he know that's wrong.
Right.
Same way when it comes down with the pastor. My pastor shouldn't be the only one that could correct me in the body of Christ. Pastor Free may be the Nathan in my life. If you don't have a Nathan in your life, you don't have good friends. Nathan told David, "Thou art the man."
Yep.
And we have a rule book, a guidebook called the Bible. If somebody corrects me according to Matthew 18, I don't have no problem, because it highlights what are the steps to go for this reconciliation, for this correction.
Right.
And so if somebody using Facebook to correct somebody, then they got the wrong book.
That's right.
Right? And so if we stay within the biblical parameters, because we do have the Bible to give us that direction, we can go a long way. But I'm afraid in this day and time when preachers, we don't want a Nathan around us. We need a Nathan.
True.
Yeah, and that's why I make the distinction between the things that are subjective and the things that are outright. And the things that are subjective, that's where we need to have caution. The things that are outright, absolutely.
Right.
I agree with that. Absolutely. We had time. Anybody have any final words that they'd like to say as far as just their thoughts on what the church is doing right?
So let me get mine in for 2 seconds. I was super excited about this subject because something that the church did right was me. Growing up in church had a huge positive impact in my life, even when I didn't know it was. And then, letting my pastor preach to me and disciple me for the last 20 years has made me be a woman that can have a successful marriage and friendships and can tell people the word of God and can bring people to Christ. And so just grew me up into the woman that I am today. And that all came through the institution of church. So I was hyped, like, let's talk about what's right, because I'm right. So that's it. That's my 3 cents.
Like it.
Right. That's good.
Pastor Corey, you got anything?
Oh, no, man. That's pretty much it. I agree with my sister. I am who I am today because of the church, right? The discipleship that I received from the church has made me a better husband, a better father, and not just a better minister. And another thing that I think the church is doing really well is addressing certain topics, right, that affect our communities. We're dealing with racism more. We're dealing with mental health more. And I believe that these things are very important to the Black community. And you're starting to see us address it more from the pulpit.
Right. That's good. Thank you for that, sir. Dr. Wright.
Man, I love the church because the church is the one place that we have as the people of color, that we can come together, we can strategize, we can save lives. That has been our home base since 1619 as we moved over. That has been what has kept us thriving. And I just love it. And I love all the uniqueness about it, that God has given us so many gifts in our church that it can reach. We don't just, it's a church that can fit everyone's need. And so God has given us a unique gift to use different pastors, different spiritual leaders to reach people. And I just love that about the church.
That's right.
Thank you for that. Pastor Free, you mentioned something real quick in your bullet points, which really stuck with me, and that is something that I keep with me. The church, the history of the church, specifically the Black church. You can, even people who have issue with the church, you can't separate American history from the Black church, and
True.
everything from civil rights and the our history and our movement up to where it was all intertwined in the Black church. So I had to tell people sometime who I'm like, hey, not even how you feel about it spiritually, you're talking about our history.
True.
You got to be careful with how you are speaking about our history and our ancestors. And it's so much stuff that you don't even know how we disseminated information through the church. All of the political movements, all of it never would have happened without the Black church.
Right.
Anyway, I'm not gonna get too far in there. Pastor Free, what you got to say? What's your last word, sir?
To that point, though, before I did it, I think that it's important that the church stop trying to separate ourselves from our history, because you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
I understand the argument that you make, but we've set a poor example of holding fast to those traditions in our history. We got to get back to that, because there's power in that. I think one of the most beautiful things about the church is the tapestry of it. Like when Jesus uses the imagery of fishers of men, we talking about net fishing, not real fishing, and you catch all kind of fish in net. And just in this discussion, we all have this beautiful sun-kissed skin, but we're different people. I mean, completely different people that God can use for his glory. Different types of churches, different types of ministries, one kingdom. And I think that the church is the only organism, the only entity that can be so beautifully diverse with one real agenda, and do our best to embrace that diversity. Could we grow in that way? Yes. But I think, if you get us, just looking at my screen, to me, that's dope, because I know that we all do it different. We've all come from different backgrounds, but God is working and alive, all of it. And I think that speaks volumes to the beauty of the church.
Wow.
Absolutely. Bishop Foreman.
I would just echo everything everybody said. I love the church. Long live the church. We're going to be here. We've been here. We're going to still be here. We about it. No limit. All of it. I did that for Pastor Free. I knew he'd know it.
Wowzers. But I would say I love that. The church ain't going nowhere. So whether you hate it or love it, you're going to have to deal with that. That's a promise.
Yep.
Right.
Built on a rock. We ain't going nowhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Dr. Brake.
About it.
I guess I'll just conclude by saying I do appreciate the resilience of the Black church, because we've been hammered and boo-booed on and all kinds of things, and yet we come back, and not only do we come back, but we grow stronger with every attack. We don't lay down and play dead. We get back up again, and we make it, and we So I appreciate that about the Black churches, that we are a resilient people.
Absolutely. Thank everyone for your time. It's greatly appreciated. Pastor Free, thank you for cutting out of church early. Everyone who came on, Pastor Core, Dr. Wright, we really appreciate that. And I think this is some really good information. So until next time, make sure you like, subscribe, share the page. And outside of that, thank you all. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Be blessed.